Why is everything so local in Lua? Because you see everyone these days writing their variables local myvar equals something or another. Let's just set it to 1. Why local? Because in Lua, you can technically say myvar equals 1, and this is all okay. This is just a global variable. What does that even mean? Well, if it means anything to you, a global variable, you can get it by also saying get fnv dot that variable, because this is a dictionary. This is a interesting thing about Lua that you can do. Will it be useful? No. But it does work. It prints out 1. But instead, these globals just aren't really good, because they are useful by saying like if something or another, if like hello or if true, then we can like do something like set some global variable myvar equal to 1, and then now we can print myvar and it'll still be equal to 1. You can't do that with a local variable, because global variables aren't limited by scope. Scope is basically how indented your code is. Now it's more complicated than that, because inner scope is defined by a block, which is usually ended by n. It can be a then end or a do end. Stuff like that defines your scope. The farther in your scope is, that's just the farther in your code is. And a local variable is confined to the scope that it was created in. It can go to like lower inner scopes, like you can access this var and another if statement below, but you can't access this data. And you notice when I write local in front of my var, it doesn't let me access it here. It says unknown global my var. But you may be saying, oh, this is useful because I can, leave my variable here and just like deal with it and deal with it out here. But there's an easier way. You say local myvar equals nil, or you set it 0 or some like default value, and this solves the issue down here. Now this is more code, but local is way more performant, because a global kind of just exists and like the interpreter has to keep track of it, whereas a local is confined to its scope. And this also prevents other issues, like if you have a highly nested variable, it's a global variable, then accessing it out up above could lead to like naming overlaps or other issues. So that's why you always should use local performance and just general code cleanliness. A lot of languages don't even allow you to make global variables, because keeping stuff at a global scope just is frowned upon, because you're never actually going to need anything globally. You should compartmentalize your code and make all of your variables local. And if you really think about it, Lua's naming conventions do a very good job at this, because in other languages you have let, you have var, Python doesn't even have a modifier in front of their variables, but local tells you exactly what it needs to be, although it is 5 characters, which is a bunch too long. But it tells you that your variables are confined, they're local. When you get out of the scope, you don't have to worry about them. And in my opinion, that's pretty cool. Thanks for watching.